All right, let's talk about one of the most wild and honestly fascinating cautionary tales to come out of Hollywood in a long time. This is the story of a movie that was more than a decade in the making. It had the biggest movie star on the entire planet backing it, and it was supposed to change, well, everything. But instead of kicking off some grand new empire, it ended up as a pretty spectacular monument to failure.
And this quote? This was the promise. You heard it everywhere. This wasn't just some clever marketing tagline. This was a personal declaration from Dwayne The Rock Johnson himself. For over 10 years, this man championed the character of Black Adam. He truly saw it as the one film that would finally reshape the whole DC cinematic universe. He poured all of his star power, his reputation, his entire brand into this one single massive promise.
And then, this was the reality. Yeah, $100 million. In the red. After all that hype, all those promises, and a truly colossal marketing push, the movie was a historic flop at the box office. We're talking an estimated loss of around $100 million. And look, this wasn't just a case of bad luck or some behind-the-scenes studio drama. The really shocking part is that the project's biggest champion might have actually been the very architect of its downfall. So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How did it all go so spectacularly wrong? And the answer, it's not just one little thing. It was a whole series of catastrophic decisions. It was kind of like a perfect storm of creative ego, some really bad political miscalculations, and, at its core, a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually makes a story work. So, let's break it all down.
Okay, so first up, a promise to change the hierarchy. We really have to understand the sheer scale of the ambition here. For Dwayne Johnson, this wasn't just another superhero gig. No way. This was supposed to be his masterpiece, the crowning jewel of his career that would put him right at the center of a brand new cinematic dynasty.
I mean, think about it. For over a decade, this was his passion project, his baby. He wasn't just starring in it, he was basically willing it into existence. He positioned it not as just a DC film, but as the DC film that was going to fix everything. And he used his status as the world's biggest movie star as proof, treating his involvement like it was an absolute guarantee of success. In every single interview, every social media post, the message was loud and clear. A new era is coming, and I'm the one leading it. The stage was set for a massive, epic win.
But, and this is a really big but, before a single frame was even shot, the whole foundation was already cracked. Because from the very beginning, Johnson approached Black Adam not as a character to explore, but as a brand to launch. And this, right here, this was the original sin of the entire project. This slide just lays out the massive disconnect perfectly. On the right, you've got the character from the comic books, a really complex, tragic guy, a tyrant made from grief and loss, and he's forever, inextricably linked to his nemesis, Shazam. But Johnson saw what's on the left, a launch pad. He wasn't interested in a complicated, messy backstory. He wanted a direct rival for Superman, and right there, the focus shifted from telling a compelling story to building a marketing fantasy. And the consequences of that shift? They were just devastating. Casual audiences walked out totally confused. Like, is he a villain? A hero? Just some angry king? He was kind of everything and nothing all at once. And meanwhile, the diehard DC fans, the very people who could have been the film's biggest champions, they felt totally betrayed. They wanted that complex anti-hero from the comics, but what they got was this sanitized, watered-down version designed to protect The Rock's image, not to honor the actual character. He was a hero without a soul. So this flawed foundation of putting the brand before the story, it led directly to some critical errors in the filmmaking itself. I mean, with the focus already in completely the wrong place, the creative decisions that followed were pretty much destined to fail.
It really boils down to two huge creative missteps that sealed the movie's fate. First, Johnson personally vetoed a really important narrative link that would have grounded the character in the DC universe. And second, with that connection totally gone, the script itself, the very heart of the film, was just left weak and formulaic.
Okay, so let's talk about this veto, because it's a big one. According to insiders, the original plan had a post-credit scene that would have directly connected Black Adam to the world of Shazam. And that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, in the comics, their history goes back 80 years. They're like yin and yang. But Johnson vetoed it. And why? Well, it wasn't for creative reasons. It was because he didn't want his powerful, serious character associated with the more goofy, lighthearted Shazam. He was building his own separate empire, and Shazam just wasn't invited to the party. So, with that one decision, Johnson basically cut the character's narrative lifeline. As you can see here, he turned Black Adam into an isolated island.
Suddenly, he has no established rival, no shared history, no emotional anchor to the universe we already know. So instead of expanding the DC world, he just felt like this random outsider who was trying to hijack it.
And then, of course, there was the script itself. You know, Johnson had promised this dark, morally complex antihero, but what we all got was a pretty paint-by-numbers superhero story. It was filled with endless slow-motion shots, a villain so forgettable I bet you can't even remember his name, and dialogue that just felt hollow. Johnson, who was also a producer with huge power, approved this script, reportedly believing that his own personal brand and charisma would be enough to paper over any cracks in the story.
The critics were brutal, but honestly, they were just saying what audiences were feeling. People didn't hate Black Adam. They felt nothing for him, and that's almost worse. Without a compelling journey or any real emotional stakes, he was just, as they say, CGI fireworks without a heart. The biggest action star in the world couldn't save a bad story. It's as simple as that.
So, if the creative mistakes were the cracks in the foundation, the political moves that happened next were the full-on earthquake that brought the whole building crashing down. Because just as the film was struggling, there was a massive shift happening behind the scenes at the studio.
Okay, so picture this. It's late 2022, and Warner Bros. Brings in new leadership to fix their struggling DC movies. They hired James Gunn and Peter Safran, and they basically give them the keys to the kingdom. Their mandate is clear. Tear down the old, messy universe and build a new, cohesive one from scratch. Now, for most actors, this is when you lay low. You keep your head down, you wait to see where you might fit in the new plan. Johnson? Well, he did the exact opposite.
Let's just walk through this timeline, because the speed at which this all imploded is stunning. So Gunn and Safran are newly in charge. What does Johnson do? He goes over their heads directly to the CEO of the entire company, Warner Bros. Discovery, to get a post-credit cameo for Henry Cavill's Superman approved. Then he goes public, announcing Superman's return, basically trying to force the new leadership's hand. While the response was swift and absolutely decisive. Within weeks, Gunn and Safran officially canceled Cavill's return and publicly announced that all future Black Adam projects were shelved. Done.
In Hollywood, you just don't publicly undermine your new bosses on day one. It's not a good look. Johnson's move was seen as an open declaration of war. It wasn't collaboration, it was a power play. It was designed to establish his own Black Adam versus Superman universe, no matter what the new leadership had planned. In that moment, he stopped being a team player. He became a political threat, and the system immediately closed ranks against him.
The box office failure was damaging, for sure. The political battle was absolutely fatal. But the final mistake, the one that truly sealed this project's fate, was what happened next. A complete and total refusal to acknowledge what had just happened.
So, after this whole collapse, everyone in Hollywood was watching. They were watching for a sign of learning. Would Johnson acknowledge the weak script to the financial loss? Would there be any humility? Instead, there was just silence and then deflection. He just tried to spin the whole thing to polish the reflection of a project that had clearly failed.
This was his public explanation. He framed the film's failure as just bad timing, an administrative issue, a mystery. I mean, really, a mystery? He completely dodged any real analysis, and even insisted the film was a success, which was a claim that financial analysts and studio leadership directly and publicly contradicted. To the rest of the industry, this didn't look like optimism, it looked like straight-up denial.
And that right there, that's the brutal truth of it all. For years, Johnson's entire brand was built on being infallible. He's the hardest worker in the room, the man who never fails. But Black Adam revealed a vulnerability he had never faced before, and his refusal to just own it. Well, it highlighted the very same ego that sank the whole project in the first place.
So, what's the big takeaway from this whole mess? Ultimately, the story of Black Adam is just a powerful lesson. It teaches us that a good story will always be more powerful than a personal brand. That collaborating inside a universe is way more valuable than trying to control it. That no star, no matter how big, is bigger than the system. And that in Hollywood, trust is the one currency you simply can't buy. Johnson didn't just lose a film, he lost the studio's trust.
You know, the real tragedy of Black Adam isn't that it failed. Lots of movies fail. The tragedy is that it was so avoidable. If the focus had been on character instead of brand, on collaboration instead of conflict, and on a little humility instead of hubris, the hierarchy of power really might have changed. Which kind of leaves us with one final question to think about. In a world full of superheroes and villains, maybe the most dangerous and powerful force of all is just a simple human one.